Do you like shortcuts? In Photoshop? Of course you do. Problem is, there aren't nearly enough of them, and many of those that exist just aren't any good. That's why I like to create my own custom shortcuts. I call them D keys, of course. Want the goods? Well, then keep watching as I show you which shortcuts to add and which ones to change. Let's get started. Now, right off the bat, I want you to rest assured that I am taking this task very seriously. I'm not just throwing a bunch of shortcuts at a bunch of commands in order to make sure everything's covered, as if that would even be possible inside of Photoshop. I am approaching this scientifically. Don't you know? There's a method to my madness. To wit, I have opened 4 different PDF files right here, one of which documents the default shortcuts on the Mac and then on the PC. So every single one of them, as well as all of my D keys variations on the Mac and the PC as well. Now, we will be working through many of the pages inside these files. There are 67 in all, just to give you a sense. I will not be showing you every one of those by any stretch of the imagination, but the important ones. Rest assured. But if you want these PDF files for your own, all 67 pages, then check out my Patreon, which is patreon.com/deeknow. All right, I'm going to go over, and I want you to notice here in the default shortcuts that they are arranged, all the shortcuts, by the way, are arranged by shortcut, not by command or tool or anything like that. That would be madness. However, by shortcut, you can see control, the control key, plus every one of the alphanumeric keys, every one of the 26 keys on a US keyboard anyway, on the Mac, on the PC right here, and then on the Mac. So control maps to command on the Mac. You know that probably already. Command Shift would map to Control Shift on the PC, then Control Alt on the PC would map to Command Option on the Mac. I know this is tedious, but I just have to cover it. And then Mash Your Fist, Command Shift Option on the Mac would map to Mash Your Fist, which is Control Shift Alt on the PC. Those are the only 3 modifier keys you can apply to a shortcut on the PC. You can't apply the Windows key, whereas on the Mac you can also add the control key. So you've got more variety available to you, actually way more variety if you're so inclined. Now I want you to see how I've arranged things here. If I have a cross through, a strike through, that indicates that I'm going to be changing that shortcut because it's outmoded generally. Whereas if you see available in green, that means it's open. You can, without stepping on Photoshop, you can assign that shortcut to anything you like within reason. There are certain things you can and cannot do, by the way. So notice right off the bat, I'm crossing out a few of the shortcuts here on the PC and the Mac, B, F, and G. I'll come to those in just a moment. I'm going to replace those. It's up to you if you do the same thing, but I think you'll find there is some reasoning going on in my skull. Control and Shift, I am replacing a few more, and there are some that are available. If you see duplicate in gray or duplicate, whatever it is, that is a duplicate. Like Control Shift O does open up Bridge from Photoshop, but so does Control Alt or Command Option O, so you don't need that duplicate shortcut. And then we have some more that are available, and we'll Mash Your Fists. A lot is available right there. And then we come to modifier keys plus number keys right here. And these are all the modifier number keys that are available. Some aren't assignable. These guys right here, Control Shift plus the numbers 2 through 9. Who knew? And they turn out to be duplicates of other ones that are here. You just can't change them. And then we've got some symbols, and it's Control and then Control Shift symbol. And on the next page we have Control Alt and Control Shift Alt. So Mash Your Fist. A lot is available, so you can use these as much as you want. However, they're not really super memorable either, but they may have meaning to you and your heart, of course. And then we have the letter keys by themselves. Most of them select tools. Some of them do other stuff, but you can remap them if you want to. We have Shift plus those letter keys. Then we've got this right here. We've got Shift Alt plus the letter keys. These you can't change. This would be Shift and Option on the Mac. You can't change those. They are mapped to blend modes. that you can assign to layers or to brush behavior, for example, brush and eraser and stamp behavior and so forth. I show those right here if you want to have yourself a look. And then we have no numbers that have without the control key, but you might add shift and alt, as you can see right here. Alt or option 1 is unassignable, and that's just the way it is. And then we've got right here some symbol variations that don't have the control key. The others are not assignable. You can't change any of these. However, you can change these next ones, the function keys, which I recommend you do change, because the way they're mapped by default in Photoshop is just complete arbitrariness. Notice F2 is the cut command. I mean, we already have a shortcut for that and copy and paste. And, you know, you just want to avoid Alt F4 and Control F4 unless you mean to press them on the PC. And then both the F9 key and Alt or Option F9 bring up the Actions panel. That panel is so dear to all of us that we need 2 neighboring shortcuts for it. So you can change these, by the way, and you can also assign them. You can assign function keys to actions. And then we've got pure miscellany. This is the way they are. You can't remap them. This is the stuff these various shortcuts do. And this one I think you might find very useful, these next 2 pages. Text edit mode. When you're in the text edit mode, pressing Control or Command M brings up the paragraph panel, but it doesn't. It assigns the curves command if you're not working with text. And by the same token, if you want to turn off automatic hyphenation, it's mash your fist H when text is active. Did you know? Well, now you do, because you can see them all right there, and there's a second page for you. You can't change any of those, but that is how things work. All right, now, why don't we actually take a look at this first page right here? Hey, a little secret about DKeys, it's a file. A tiny little file that contains 96 new and improved shortcuts for Photoshop. And I'm going to make that file available to my patrons. You can become one if you like at patreon.com/DeekNow. In fact, you could be there right now, or keep watching as we sample some more sweet, scrumptious shortcuts inside Photoshop. Right off the bat, I'm going to reassign 3 of these, B, F, and G. Now, G is good. It groups layers. I just want the groups layers version, the group from layers that has the ... so I can name the layer as I create it. So I went ahead and reassigned Control or Command G for that purpose. Control B for color balance? Really? You don't use that. You don't, do you? As a static adjustment? Definitely not, right? If you want a white balance, you want the Camera Raw filter or some variation of Camera Raw or Lightroom, something like that. Not this old, crusty old command. And then Control Command F for search. That's just pure marketing. I'm going to turn it back to the last filter, and I'm going to do so right now. So I'll bring up Photoshop, and just to give you a sense of what I was talking about with the Control F, Command F on the Mac. It used to, and it will again, thanks to DKeys. If you go along with what I'm suggesting here, it will reassign the last filter, and then Control or Command Option. Control Alt or Command Option F will bring up the dialog box. It'll force the display of the dialog box. So I prefer that behavior to this. Edit, you go to the edit menu and choose the search command. Control or Command F doesn't choose the find command. It chooses the search command. And the search command doesn't bring up anything that has an F in it. It brings up the discover panel, which is a marketing panel, by the way. Some of this stuff's cool, like select background. If you want a quick action for selecting the background, whatever. If you like this panel, more the power to you. But you can get to it without a keyboard shortcut by clicking on the little magnifying glass, the little search icon in the top right corner of the screen. It's always there, and all you have to do is click, and that brings up the discover panel. And then you don't have to be confused about whether we're talking about the search command or find or something along those lines. All right, but here's another one that I just want to call your attention to. Under the select menu, subject. That's an awesome command. It's one of the awesome new commands that's come to us in the last few years, and it just works better and better with every version of the software. It should have a shortcut. Now, it kind of does if the object selection tool is active over here in the toolbox. Then you've got select subject up here in the options bar. I also want you to notice something else, just real quick, okay? This is gonna become important later. If I hover over the dog, it flashes for me, but if I hover away, it doesn't. But I can also turn on this icon right here. Notice that will go ahead and let me see the dog even when I'm not hovering, and it has a keyboard shortcut of N. Just that one little tiny function has a keyboard shortcut devoted to it. All right, well, we're going to change that because N has something better in store for it. Anyway, notice I go back to the rectangular marquee tool or any other tool for that matter, and I don't see the subject button up here in the options bar. But I would like to assign a keyboard shortcut. So I thought to myself, well, Control B, Command B on the Mac, that brings up the stupid color balance dialog box. It is stupid. Well, let me show you. And look how dumb that is. It's so dumb, and it doesn't do anything you would want it to do. Cancel. All right, so why not assign it to this? Now you might say, Deke, that's dumb. There's dumb for you because a B for the subject command. Well, there is a B in it. It's the third letter. But here's what I'm thinking. Control or Command A selects everything. Control or Command B selects something very specific, the subject. All right, so how do you make that happen? Let's say you're entertaining this nutty idea for just a second. You'd go to the edit menu and choose keyboard shortcuts, which itself has a shortcut of Mash Your Fist K. Its neighbor right there also has a shortcut, menus of a dumb shortcut, just because you use this command, by the way, to turn on and off commands and assign colors to them and stuff like that. But we don't need a shortcut for it because you don't use it that often. And also, when you choose keyboard shortcuts, it's right next door. It's right there. It's already inside this dialog box. So it's got a shortcut for as little as you might use it. All right, I'll switch to application menus right here. Notice my set is set to Photoshop defaults as by default. And so now I would go down to select, twirl it open, and I would scroll down a little bit till I see subject. There it is. Click on it and press Control B. Obviously, on the Mac, that's going to be Command B. Hey, it's already in use and will be removed from image adjustments, color balance if accepted. You just want to click accept. By the way, just click that button. It'd be great if you did. Or you can accept and go to conflict and just pity that command, that it still exists. All right, now, at this point, notice the set reads Photoshop defaults modified. You can save it off. Actually, either of these buttons is going to let you save a new custom shortcut set if you want. I've already made a set, as you can see here, DKeys 2023. Hey, do you want to save your changes before switching sets? No, I don't. You might, but I don't, so I just click no. And then click OK. All right, now check it. Let's say I want to select this dog. Control B, Command B on the Mac. That's all I have to do. I don't have to mess with any of the other tools. The dog is now duly selected. We'll come back to it to see if the selection's any good or not, but for now, I'm just going to go out. So that's what I would recommend. And by the way, it's an orange because this is something I came up with this year. As I'm recording, it's 2023 is the year. These are things that I've done in the past, like reassign Control F or Command F to last filter and Control or Command G to group from layers, ... All right, let's move right along, shall we? Things get more interesting as we go. Well, actually, the height is select subject in my opinion, but notice Control Shift. Most things I'm leaving alone. It's fine, but some of them are just like, well, Control Shift B for auto color. B for auto color, first of all. Also, when's the last time you used the auto color command? Now, maybe you do. Maybe you use it all the time. It's basically a levels command preset is what it is. And it evaluates the image. It's kind of a little bit smart, but it's old. It's an old school thing. Same with auto tone, which is Control Shift L by default for levels. And then I told you Browse and Bridge is a duplicate. This is kind of old school Photoshop. About 5 to 10 years ago. When it introduced a new command, it would get a shortcut. So lens correction came to us, I don't know, a dozen years ago. And when it did, it got a shortcut. But my guess is you don't use it that much anymore. You probably do your lens corrections in Camera Raw or in Lightroom. You can use this, but does it really deserve a shortcut? Control Shift U. Yes, desaturate's great. I like that. It takes the color out of an image. It is a static command. That's okay. I'm just moving it. to a better location. And then V, paste in place, also a very useful command. I'm moving it. All right, so let's see what I did, shall we? I went ahead and assigned most of the control shift or command shifts to dynamic adjustment layers. B for black and white, L for a levels adjustment layer, because controller command L is a static levels, controller command M is a static curve. So I'm making control shift dynamic. That's why we're moving. It was available. Also, I'm not doing anything bad, or that would be disrespectful. Don't you know controller command shift U is going to create an adjustment layer, hue saturation, and then V for vibrance. Isn't that awesome? Then I figured, hey, O for blending options, just in case, you want a shortcut. You can double click on a layer thumbnail, but sometimes you can't. So might as well give it a keyboard shortcut. Controller Command Shift P, I assigned this year to place embedded, which goes ahead and places an image as a dynamic smart object. And this is the same shortcut that's at work inside Illustrator, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Q is available. Come back to that in a second. And then R for neural filters. Neural filters are the other really great feature that need a shortcut that has come to us in the last few years. And so I'm giving it a shortcut. Why not Q? Why didn't I come up with something for Q? Well, because on the Mac, it has a different purpose, and I want this to be cross-platform. If you hit Command-Shift-Q, do you even know this? You log out. You log out of your user in the operating system. Now, ... is good news. It gives you 60 seconds to change your mind in case you hit it automatically. But it is a little bit dangerous if you don't know about it. And hey, now you do, so there's the good news. All right, I'm going to switch back to the Windows document here and advance to Control-Alt. This would be Command-Option for the Mac. And now I'll go to the defaults. Notice that B, some things are available. And then B, F, and P, and V I decided to override. And so here's what I decided. Is B is more color balance. It's going to be color balance with the last applied settings. Well, you're not going to have any last applied settings because you never used the darn thing in the first place because it's a static command that doesn't work right. And so Control-Alt-B, I decided save selection. So, hey, why that? Because there's no B's in any of those words. Well, buzz and bees, but also, hey, because Controller Command B, I have selecting the subject, and then you can just turn around and add the Option key and save that selection as an alpha channel. Just like that, you got that thing saved for later enjoyment. D was available, so I'm just duplicating the layer or group. Now, it's kind of like just jumping by pressing Control or Command J, except for that, and you may know Control-Alt or Command-Option J. Isn't it right here? Yes, that's new layer via copy ... so you can name the new layer as you jump it. But this way, you can move the layer, you can duplicate it inside the document, just like jump would do, just like Control-J, or you can send it to a different open image. So I figure you might want that. That's why these guys are new this year. Control-Alt or Command-Option-F, that's just going to repeat the last filter, but with the last settings, you're going to get the dialog box so you can modify the settings. This one you might furrow a brow at. It could be a gotcha if you don't know about it. So use it at your discretion. Control-Alt-H. I have it set to View Flip Horizontal. So the idea is you're looking at an image like a portrait shot, and you want to flip it to make sure it makes sense when it's reflected vertically, and then you don't escape out. You press that keyboard shortcut again in order to flip it back. So if you like this command, it's just flip it on screen. It's just a view thing. Then there's a shortcut for you. Okay, now we get into some interesting territory that I find very helpful. And I'll demonstrate this in just a moment. To get rid of a layer mask, you've got a layer mask and you want to get rid of it, P for poof. That's what I was thinking. Makes it go away. And then, because that's a lead-in to either adding or deleting a filter mask for a smart filter on a smart object. And that desperately needs a shortcut because you don't always want those darn filter masks. And so I use this one all the time. Control-Alt-Q or Command-Option-Q on the Mac. And then we'll see that in just a moment. And then Control-Alt-R is select a mask. That's just the default shortcut. But I want you to remember, shift choosing that command, select a mask, gets you the Legacy Refine Edge dialog box. I think Adobe's going to kill that one going forward, but for right now it works. And then V, remember, by the way, I got rid of Control Shift V for paste and place, so I moved it to Control Alt V. So I just moved it to a better location, in my opinion. This is, you know, here's one more. Convert to profile. If you ever like want to convert the color profile assigned to a document from like Adobe RGB or Image P3 or something like that to sRGB for devices in the web, then Control Alt X. It was just open, newly open, by the way. It used to be a 3D thing, and so I assigned it to that. And then Control Alt Y or Command Option Y, also available. Well, in Z, it is not kind of, well, whatever. Anyway, Y, I assigned to reveal a selection. So it's the opposite of P that makes the layer mask go poof. It makes a layer mask, but you have to have a selection outline for it to work. Want to see what I'm talking about? Well, I'll bring back Photoshop because this is actually terribly useful stuff. We have a selection outline for the dog, and now I can see if it's any good by pressing Control Alt. I could just drop down here, by the way, to add layer mask, so it's not necessary that you have a keyboard shortcut, but if you like shortcuts, then Control Alt Y or Command Option Y in a Mac converts that selection outline to a layer mask. And now you can see, well, it's not a very good layer mask, is it? Well, that's why you would press the Shift key. Press and hold Shift key and go to the Select menu and choose Select and Mask to bring up the Refine Mask dialog box. And then I'm just going to change that value right there, that radius value, edge detection radius, to 30 pixels. That's going to give us a much smoother hair edge like that. Voila! It's in such better shape. Now, if I wanted to get rid of this layer mask at this point, because it's selected, I could just press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac. However, if it was the dog that was selected instead, the layer thumbnail, and I pressed backspace or delete, I'd get rid of the entire layer. Whereas, if I want to make sure I just get rid of the layer mask, it doesn't matter whether the thumbnail or the layer mask is selected. I can press Control Alt or Command Option P for poof, just like that. All right, now what about that smart filter mask? Well, let's say I'll just right-click. The rectangular marquee tool is active. I'll right-click and choose Convert to Smart Object right there, which I'm also giving a shortcut, by the way, of Control or Command comma. Let's try that. Why don't I mean, I said what is going to be, but Control or Command comma. And now we've got a smart object. You can see I've placed the image in indestructible container right there. You can see that it's embedded by that little page icon. And now I could go up to the filter menu and choose blur and choose Gaussian blur right there and give it a big, huge radius value and click OK. Now, I really just want the background to be blurry, not the dog. Problem is, it's hard to work with an existing filter mask. There it is, but it's easier to create a new filter mask. It just is. Let me show you. I'll get rid of that one by pressing, because otherwise you got to right click. You got to right click and choose delete filter mask. So much work. Whereas you can just press Control Alt Q or Command Option Q on the Mac to quit that mask. And now I would want to select the dog again, which I didn't save it, so I'm going to have to go to the trouble of, what was it? Control B is the keyboard shortcut for selecting the dog, and you can see selects it right away just like that. And then I want to turn it into a filter mask. Control Alt Q, Command Option Q on the Mac not only quits the mask, it also remakes it. So I'll make a mask, and this time notice the mask has a purpose. It's got contents. Now I'm masking the wrong thing. I'm masking the dog. That is to say, the blur, I'm blurring the dog. I want to blur outside the dog, so I would invert that mask by pressing Control I, Command I on the Mac. That is a regular old default shortcut here inside Photoshop. All right, back to D keys in progress. Let's advance to the next page right here, which is going to be the Masher Fist keyboard shortcuts. There's a bunch of them. Oh, over here you can see a bunch of default shortcuts as well as these guys that are available. Now, these shortcuts really fall into that category of bright, new, shiny feature. Photoshop decided to give it a shortcut because the Masher Fist shortcuts used to be open. So remember when Adaptive Wide Angle first came out? How often do you use it now? Do you remember? And then the black and white adjustment layer. That's great. I like black and white adjustment layers. I gave them a shortcut. You may recall I gave them a shortcut of right there, Control Shift or Command Shift B. However, there's no sense in having a shortcut for a static adjustment, so we'll override that. Content aware scale. When's the last time you used that one? And then auto contrast, another one in that sort of auto category of auto levels adjustments. And edit menus, I already complained about that. New layer, you mash your fist in, new layer without a dialog box, so you don't name it. You just create a new layer. No, that's a bad habit. And then open as, well, open as what? So in other words, you take an image that's corrupt. This used to be the purpose for it. And you open it as an old school raw image, not anything to do with the camera raw. And that way you were trying to salvage a ruined file. That just doesn't happen anymore. And otherwise you're just going to mess up the file format and it's not going to open right. And then print one copy? No. Anyway, so I came up with some different stuff. Mostly in the image menu, you can see right here, reveal all for A. That makes sense, right? Because you're revealing, you know what that command does? It goes ahead and uncrops the image to include every single bit of every layer. And then trim is going to automatically collapse the image, automatically crop it to get rid of any emptiness. So I thought B would be good for it. And then the good content aware fill. Well, you know, I think it's a very useful workspace. If you want to duplicate the entire image, just so you don't accidentally mess up the image you're working on, you just create a new duplicate, and it'll save. If you try to save it, it'll invite you to save it as a new file. Control Shift Alt, mash your fist G for color range. I just love color range. It's a really useful variation. It's like the magic wand on steroids. It's still a very useful command. H. Notice H and Y I've assigned to flip horizontal. This is not, we're not just flipping the view like in that with that view command, view flip horizontal. This is actually flipping the entire image, every single layer, every single alpha channel, everything. Flip it horizontal or flip it vertical. Once upon a time, I found those to be useful. You may. L for calculations, if you still use that to generate your complex masks. M for similar, which is going to grow a selection outline according to the tolerance value that's assigned to the magic wand tool. Either you know that or you don't, but it can be very useful at times. Mash your fist N to make a background layer. Sometimes you want a flat background, so you take the layer, presumably an empty layer, and turn it into a background. Or if you have a background, it'll turn it into a floating layer. O, open, don't just open as ... Open as a smart object. This is great if you're in Photoshop and you want to open a Camera Raw image inside Camera Raw. You want to open it as a smart object in Camera Raw right away. Then you can do it with this shortcut. P is going to export your artboards to PDF. That's not something a lot of people do. That is how I made this file, however. Q. That's available, but I didn't assign it. Again, it's a Macintosh thing. Notice Command-Shift-Option-Q forces a logout. It doesn't even trouble you with a warning. It just goes ahead and logs you out. That's a good one. All right. Anyway, so back to the PC version, just so we're seeing this. These I didn't change. I went ahead and remapped that desaturate adjustment. Static adjustment desaturates the image or the layer, takes all the color out of it. I just mapped it to mash your fish hue because you probably don't use it very often. If you just want to assign a different profile, not convert, but assign a different color profile, you've got an sRGB image, for example, and you want to goose it by converting it just by assigning image P3 to it instead, then mash your fist X. Try that one if you want. And then I always get requests for flattening an image, a shortcut that just flattens the entire image. I used to have it assigned to F, but that's got a better command, find layers. You can experiment with that. It's actually useful for finding layers in the layers panel. Whereas Z seemed to me like this is the last thing you do to an image. Flatten it. It's for real. And so mash your fist Z. That way you're making a conscious decision. All right, what's next? I'll just skip ahead. I think I mentioned Control Comma. Yes, this is a good one. I use this one all the time, actually. It hides or shows layers. So if you press Control or Command Comma, you will hide the active layer. I don't find that to be very useful. Whereas convert to smart object, that's great. And then so forth, some other stuff you might want to try out right here. You can try that at your leisure. I'm going to go ahead right here to the tools, which I find to be helpful. What page is that on? It looks like it's page 8. I don't have the page numbers memorized. These are just, you just press a key and get different things. Well, in a previous week, I discussed my hatred for the frame tool, the weird, odd frame tool, so which has a keyboard shortcut of K that doesn't go with it anyway. So I changed that to the targeted adjustment tool, which is only available when you're working with a hue saturation or curves adjustment layer. But when you do have one of those adjustment layers going, it can be very helpful indeed. You can modify colors just by dragging. And I showed you what it did. It applied to the object selection tool. It just gave you that preview of the dog. Remember that? So it's not quite available, but it's not used well. Whereas the blur, sharpen, and smudge tool, I love the smudge tool when masking. It's so useful. It doesn't have a shortcut. It's the one group of tools that don't have shortcuts. So give it N just because N is open. And then R gets you the rotate view tool. Many of you probably use that on a regular basis. However, I don't, and I find that I accidentally press that key. I'll show you a better way to get to it maybe. You can, decide on your own about that. But I reassign R to the convert point tool, which I find to be exceedingly useful when I'm using the pen tool. So this way, P gets me the pen tool, and I don't have to cycle through from the pen tool to the convert point tool. I can just go directly to it by pressing the R key. All right, then we have Shift plus letters right here. Let's check those out. Notice that I'm applying a lot of modifications here, and that's because Shift-C will cycle through the tools in any given slot. But oftentimes it cycles through too many tools, like crop, perspective crop, yes, slice, select as well. I just kept it down to crop and perspective crop. And you can do that from the keyboard shortcuts if you like. Let me actually, that's worth visiting, so I'll just bring back Photoshop here, and I'll mash my fist K in order to go from in order to bring up the keyboard shortcuts as we're seeing right here. And I'll switch from application menus to tools right there. And so what you would do is you would take one of the tools out of the loop. Like, let's say you just want to switch by pressing L. You just want to press a switch between the lasso and polygonal lasso tools, not the magnetic lasso tools, and just get that guy out of there. And so I just backspaced it, and then just accept your change and save your modified set. All right, so I'm going to cancel out because I'm not doing that, but I'll just go ahead and minimize Photoshop. And here we are back in Acrobat. Notice Shift-D is going to switch us between a few. Well, Shift-G is a good one. Gradient Paint Bucket 3D Material Drop. That last one doesn't even work anymore, so I just got that out of the loop. Shift-H, Hand Tool and Rotate View Tool. So that's where R went, is because they both are in that same tool slot. So I figure you can use Shift-H to switch between them. And then so for J, look at Shift-J by default goes between the brush tools to the patch tool to the red eye tool, all the tools. It's just too much. I just want to be able to use Shift-J to switch between the spot healing brush and the healing brush. And so forth, as you can see here. Shift-P, not pen and freeform pen, rather pen and curvature tool. You may not use a curvature pen tool very often, but it is actually kind of an anti-pen tool. Instead of dragging to create a smooth point, you click to create a smooth point. So it can be very useful. Then Shift-R is going to switch you between that convert point tool and then the custom shape tool. That way, I know they're not even in the same slot, but that way then Shift-U is just rectangle, ellipse, and line instead of switching you between all of the vector-based shape tools and so forth. And that, my friends, is my extensive defense of how you might go about changing a few keyboard shortcuts inside Photoshop to achieve what I like to call DEEK keys. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. As for DEEK keys, go get them at patreon.com/DEEKNOW. And then go to DEEK.com and sign up for my newsletter. I'm Deke McClellan. This is DEEK Now.